Have you ever felt like your own family was holding you hostage, trapping you in a life you never chose, while everyone else thought you had it all together? That's exactly what happened to me when my dad, the man who was supposed to support my dreams, forced me to work for his business for free, day after grueling day, with no pay, no thanks, and no way out. I'm talking about years of sweat, frustration, and feeling like my own future was slipping through my fingers, all because I couldn't say no to the one person I owed everything to, or so I thought. This isn't just a story about being overworked. It's about the gut-wrenching pain of betrayal by someone you love, the suffocating weight of obligation, and the desperate, messy fight to break free and find out who you really are. From the endless days of feeling like a pawn in someone else's game to a shocking twist that made me question everything I knew about my dad, I'm spilling it all. Stick with me through this long, emotional journey because I'm still figuring out if I've truly found freedom or if I'm just running from a past I can't escape. I need to know what you'd do if you were in my shoes. How do you rebuild trust with family after they've broken it? Or do you even try? Let's dive into the chaos of my life and see if we can find some answers together. My name's Ethan, and I'm 32 years old, living in the small coastal town of Wilmington, North Carolina, where the salty breeze off the Atlantic mixes with the hum of fishing boats and the chatter of tourists along the river walk. I've been here for the past 3 years, renting a tiny, weathered apartment above a seafood shack on Front Street, where the smell of fried shrimp lingers in the air and the sound of seagulls is a constant backdrop to my thoughts. Wilmington's a place of history and charm, with its cobblestone streets and antebellum houses. But for me, it's also a refuge, a spot I fled to after years of feeling caged in my hometown of Fayetteville, about 2 hours inland. That's where my dad, Greg, still runs his small construction business, a gritty, no-frills operation he built from the ground up after serving in the Army. He's a hard man, shaped by discipline and a belief that family means sacrifice, a 60-year-old with calloused hands and a stare that can cut through you. Growing up, our modest split-level house on the edge of Fayetteville was filled with the sound of his barked orders and the weight of his expectations, a place I couldn't wait to escape. The emotional conflict tearing at me isn't just about unpaid labor. It's the deep, festering wound of feeling like my dad saw me as a tool rather than a son, stripping away my dreams and leaving me drowning in resentment and guilt for even wanting more. From the time I was 18, right after high school, Dad roped me into working for his construction company, promising it was just for a summer to help out during a rough patch. That summer turned into a decade, 10 years of hauling lumber, pouring concrete, and fixing drywall under the brutal North Carolina sun, all without a dime to show for it. He'd say it was family duty, that I owed him for raising me, for the roof over my head, and I bought into it for too long, feeling like I'd be ungrateful, or worse, disloyal, if I pushed back. I wanted to go to college, study graphic design, maybe work in advertising or animation, but every time I brought it up, Dad shut me down, saying art was a pipe dream, and real men worked with their hands. The anger built slowly, a quiet burn every time I'd see friends move on, getting degrees, traveling, starting families. While I was stuck in Fayetteville, my hands blistered and my spirit bruised. I hated myself for not standing up sooner, but I hated him more for making me feel like my worth was tied to his business, not my own aspirations. Memories of my life before Wilmington, before I broke free, haunt me on quiet nights when I'm sitting on my tiny balcony, watching the Cape Fear River shimmer under the moonlight, the distant clink of glasses from nearby bars a reminder of a world I'm still trying to join. I think back to growing up in Fayetteville, to long afternoons kicking a soccer ball in the dusty lot near our house on Ramsey Street, dreaming of a life beyond the chain-link fences and strip malls. I remember Dad's rare smiles, like the time he took me fishing at Lake Rim when I was 10, his gruff laugh as I reeled in a tiny catfish, a moment of connection I clung to even as things got harder. I can still picture the day I graduated high school, my cap and gown feeling like a ticket out, only for Dad to pull me aside that night and lay out his plan for me to learn the trade, his voice heavy with expectation I didn't dare challenge. Back then, I thought loyalty meant obedience, a belief that kept me tethered to his world far longer than I should have been. Now, walking along Wilmington's boardwalk, the creak of wooden planks underfoot, I ache for those simpler days, wondering if I misread Dad's intentions or if I was just too scared to see the cage for what it was. The struggle to keep going under Dad's thumb, to hold on to any piece of myself, was a soul-crushing grind, one that tested every ounce of my patience as I tried to carve out a sliver of independence in Fayetteville's suffocating routine. For years, I'd wake up at 5 a.m., drag myself to whatever job site Dad had lined up, usually some suburban development or warehouse reno, spending hours in the heat or rain, my back aching as I lugged materials while he barked orders. I'd come home to our house, the smell of sawdust and sweat clinging to me, and crash on the couch, too tired to even sketch the designs I'd once dreamed of turning into a career. I'd sneak moments to doodle on scrap paper during lunch breaks, hiding my sketches under a toolbox so Dad wouldn't see, and lecture me about wasting time. Winters were the worst, the cold biting into my fingers as I worked on frozen scaffolding, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. I started stashing away small bits of cash from odd jobs I'd pick up on the side, mowing lawns, helping neighbors with repairs, hiding it in an old coffee can under my bed, a secret fund for a future I wasn't sure I'd ever reach. Every day felt like a battle between duty and desire, a war I fought alone while Dad seemed oblivious to the toll it took. The breaking point came 3 years ago, on a sweltering July afternoon, when the weight of Dad's control hit me like a sledgehammer, leaving me shattered in a way I hadn't felt even after a decade of unpaid work. We were on a job site in Hope Mills, just outside Fayetteville, renovating a strip mall, the air thick with humidity and the drone of power tools. I'd been at it for 12 hours straight, my shirt soaked with sweat, when Dad chewed me out in front of the crew for a minor mistake. Something about mismeasuring a beam, calling me useless, and saying I'd never make it on my own. It wasn't the first time he'd cut me down, but something snapped inside me that day. I dropped my hammer, walked off the site, and didn't look back, my heart pounding as I realized I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I went home, packed a duffel bag with whatever I could grab, took the $800 I'd saved in that coffee can, and drove to Wilmington that night, not even telling Dad I was leaving. I felt this wild mix of terror and relief as I crossed the city limits, the neon lights of gas stations blurring past, knowing I'd burned a bridge, but also feeling the first breath of freedom in years. That night, crashing on a cheap motel bed near Wrightsville Beach, the sound of waves crashing in the distance, I cried for the first time in ages, unsure if I'd just liberated myself or doomed myself to fail. The unexpected twist came 6 months later, and it turned my world upside down, leaving me reeling with confusion and a reluctant pang of guilt as I sat in a quiet coffee shop on Market Street in Wilmington, the smell of roasted beans grounding me while my emotions spun out of control. I'd started rebuilding my life, working odd jobs at local restaurants, taking online graphic design courses when I could afford them, even landing a few freelance logo gigs through a friend of a friend. I hadn't spoken to Dad since I left, ignoring his calls and texts, assuming he was just mad I'd walked out. But then I got a voicemail from him, his voice rougher than usual, almost broken, asking me to call back because he needed to explain. When I finally did, bracing myself for a fight, he told me something I never expected. He hadn't paid me all those years because the business was barely afloat, drowning in debt from bad contracts and medical bills after Mom passed when I was 15. He'd kept me on, unpaid, not out of greed or control, but because he couldn't afford to lose me as free labor, and he was too ashamed to admit how bad things were. He said he'd pushed me so hard because he thought teaching me the trade was the only way to give me a future, even if it wasn't the one I wanted. Hearing that, I felt like the ground shifted beneath me. My resentment clashed with this sudden understanding of his desperation, his fear of failing me in a way I hadn't seen. But it didn't erase the years of feeling used, the dreams I'd buried under his needs. I hung up, staring at my untouched latte, torn between anger for what he'd cost me and sorrow for the burden he'd carried alone. In the years that followed, I tried to process this new reality, building a fragile life in Wilmington while wrestling with the unresolved pain of Dad's actions, as the coastal town's laid-back rhythm became both a comfort and a reminder of how far I'd drifted from family. Work became my anchor. I landed a part-time gig at a local print shop, using their equipment to hone my design skills after hours, and started building a small portfolio of branding projects for Wilmington's mom-and-pop businesses. I'd spend evenings at my apartment, the salty air drifting through my cracked window, tweaking designs on a second-hand laptop, fighting the voice in my head that echoed Dad's doubts about my pipe dream. Summers in Wilmington were vibrant, with festivals along the riverfront and the bustle of tourists, but I'd often walk alone along Carolina Beach, the sand cool underfoot, wondering if I'd ever feel whole without mending things with him. Dad sent occasional texts, updates on the business, a photo of a job site, nothing heavy, but I rarely replied, unsure if I could handle reopening that door. I started journaling, scribbling thoughts in a notebook at a picnic table by the Battleship North Carolina Memorial, trying to sort out if forgiveness was possible or if some wounds cut too deep. Wilmington's beauty, the pastel sunsets, the creak of docks, kept me grounded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my newfound freedom felt hollow without closure. Reflecting on my past with Dad became a near-daily ritual, as I tried to make sense of where we stood now, especially on long walks through Wilmington's historic district, the old brick buildings a backdrop to my churning memories. I'd think about the time Dad taught me to ride a bike in our Fayetteville driveway, his hands steadying me, a rare softness in his voice as he cheered me on, a memory I held tight even through the hard years. I remembered his quiet grief after Mom's death, how he'd sit alone in the garage late at night, a beer in hand, not knowing I was watching from the window, wishing I could help, but not knowing how. I'd recall the arguments, too, his sharp words when I'd sketch instead of study, the way his face hardened when I mentioned college, like I was betraying him by wanting more. Walking past Wilmington's old cotton exchange, the history of struggle etched into its walls, I'd wrestle with whether I'd been too quick to leave, if I should have pushed harder to understand his side before running. I thought about the last time I saw him, that day on the job site, his weathered face twisted in frustration, and wondered if he'd felt abandoned when I walked away, just as I'd felt trapped under his control. As time passed, bringing Wilmington's humid summers and mild winters, I built a tentative new normal, though the unresolved rift with Dad lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. My career was slowly taking shape, more freelance design clients, a small online presence with my portfolio, even a dream of starting my own branding agency someday. But I'd come home to an empty apartment, the silence heavier than the ocean breeze. I started connecting with local creatives, grabbing coffee at spots like Drift on Front Street, their encouragement a balm to old wounds. But even their camaraderie couldn't fill the gap Dad's absence left. I'd explore hidden spots like Airlie Gardens on off days, the sprawling oaks and azaleas, a quiet space to think, wondering if I'd ever feel at peace with how things ended. I bought a cheap sketchbook, filling it with ideas for projects and doodles of the coast, a small act of reclaiming the creativity Dad had dismissed, but each stroke felt like a question. Was I building this life for me, or to prove him wrong? I'd scroll through old photos on my phone, me and Dad at a county fair when I was a kid, both of us holding cotton candy, grinning, and feel this pull to reach out, to see if he'd changed, but fear of rejection or another fight held me back. The grind of chasing my dream while carrying this emotional baggage felt like wading through quicksand, each step forward weighed down by the past I couldn't fully leave behind. I'd spend long nights on design projects, the glow of my laptop casting shadows in my cramped apartment, pushing myself to meet deadlines for clients while fighting exhaustion and the nagging doubt that I'd never be enough. I started taking on bigger gigs, redesigning a website for a local brewery, creating flyers for Wilmington's Film Festival. Each small win a brick in the wall of my new life, but I'd still lie awake, the hum of crickets outside, wondering if Dad ever thought about me, if he regretted how things turned out. I volunteered at a community art program, teaching kids to use design software at a rec center near Greenfield Lake, hoping to find meaning in giving back, but even that felt like a distraction from the real issue. I'd drive out to Coorey Beach on quiet weekends, watching waves crash against the pier, asking myself if freedom meant cutting ties forever or if there was a way to rebuild without losing myself again. Wilmington had become my sanctuary, with its quirky cafes and hidden marshes, but I wasn't sure if I could keep running from Fayetteville's ghosts without facing them head-on. The weight of judgment, both Dad's and my own, didn't fade easily. Even as I carved out this new path, each memory of his harsh words a reminder of how long I'd felt unworthy. I'd run into old Fayetteville acquaintances sometimes, folks visiting Wilmington for the beach, their casual "how's your dad?" questions reopening old scars, even if I knew they didn't mean harm. I started avoiding certain social spots, like a popular bar near the riverfront, where I'd risk those awkward encounters, opting instead for solitary walks through Haliburton Park, where the pine trails let me breathe without feeling exposed. I'd sit on a bench by the lake there, watching turtles sun themselves, and wonder if I'd ever shake the label of the son who walked away, or if Dad's view of me as a failure had stuck for good. I even considered moving again, maybe to Raleigh or Charleston, somewhere no one knew my story, but the thought of running felt like admitting defeat, like I couldn't build a life strong enough to withstand the past. Wilmington had become my home, with its historic charm and endless horizon, and I wanted to believe I could stand my ground here, even if it meant carrying the weight of what I'd left behind. Now, as I sit here in my apartment, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating my latest design project, the faint sound of a cargo ship horn echoing from the river, I'm still wrestling with what to do next. I've found a kind of freedom, my design career is growing, and I've built a life in Wilmington that's mine, not shaped by someone else's rules or debts. But knowing why Dad kept me unpaid, knowing it came from his own struggle rather than malice, has me questioning if I've been too harsh, if I should have stayed long enough to see his side before I bolted. I hate the thought of him alone in Fayetteville, Maybe thinking he's lost me for good, working those long hours with no one to share the load. But I can't ignore the years I lost. The way his choices stole pieces of me, I'm still trying to reclaim. I've got a big project coming up, a branding contract for a local chain of coffee shops, a chance to really make my mark. And I keep wondering if I should tell him about it. If seeing me succeed on my terms might bridge the gap between us, or if it'll just dig up more hurt. My phone's right here on the desk, his number a tap away, but I don't know if I'm ready to hear his voice, to risk being pulled back into that old dynamic, or to admit I've missed him more than I can say. So, I'm turning to you guys, because I'm at a crossroads and I could really use some perspective. If you were in my shoes, would you reach out to your dad, share your success, try to rebuild that connection even if it means risking more pain? Or would you keep your distance, focus on the freedom you've fought for, and let him make the next move if he's ready? How do you balance the pull of family with the need to protect the life you've built, especially when the hurt came from a place of desperation, not cruelty? I want to believe there's a way to have both, my independence and some kind of peace with him, but I'm not sure how to get there without losing the ground I've gained. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'm honestly torn, and I'd love to know what you'd do if you were standing where I am right now, wondering if true freedom means letting go of the past or finding a way to heal it.